What would you do if someone handed you an invitation, not as an act of kindness, but as the setup to a cruel joke? For 3 years, Anna Williams had cleaned their floors. She'd heard their whispers behind closed doors. She knew exactly how invisible they thought she was. So when the billionaire's wife handed her that wedding invitation with that smile on her face, Anna understood immediately. This wasn't generosity. It was theater. A public humiliation designed to remind her of exactly where she belonged. But what Vanessa Sterling didn't know was that the woman pushing that cleaning cart once had a name that commanded respect across 3 states. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Because what happened when Anna walked into that wedding? Nobody saw it coming. The Sterling Tower rose 43 stories above the city skyline, all gleaming glass and polished steel. Everything about it spoke of power and money. Italian marble floors that reflected the light from crystal chandeliers, leather furniture that cost more than most families earned in a year, art on the walls worth enough to change someone's life. The building was owned by Richard Sterling, one of the youngest billionaires in the country. His tech empire had made him a fortune that most people couldn't even comprehend. The Sterling Tower was just one small piece of his vast holdings, but it stood as a monument to his success. 43 floors of pure, unapologetic wealth. Anna Williams knew every inch of this building. She knew which executive always spilled his morning coffee at exactly 9 o'clock on Tuesdays. She knew where the young lawyers went to hide when the pressure became too much. She knew which marble tiles had hairline cracks that only someone on their hands and knees would ever notice. For 3 years, she had been part of the landscape here. People stepped around her the way they'd step around a potted plant. Sometimes they said, "Excuse me," as they passed. Most times, they didn't bother. At 42 years old, Anna had learned all the unspoken rules of being invisible. Keep your head down. Do your work well, but quietly. Don't speak unless someone speaks to you first. Don't make eye contact. It only makes people uncomfortable when they remember you're actually human. But this Tuesday morning felt different. Anna sensed it the moment she stepped off the service elevator on the executive floor. There was an energy in the air, something that made the small hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She pushed her cleaning cart slowly down the hallway. Her worn sneakers silent on the floor, she'd polished to a mirror shine just yesterday. That's when she heard the laughter. Vanessa Sterling was moving through the lobby like royalty on parade, her designer heels clicking sharply against Anna's freshly cleaned floor. She was surrounded by her usual circle, women in clothes that cost more than Anna's monthly rent, carrying handbags Anna recognized from magazine covers, their laughter practiced and perfectly timed. And in Vanessa's hand, held up like a trophy, was a cream-colored envelope with elegant gold lettering, with Anna's name written across the front. Anna's hands tightened on the handle of her cart. Her pulse quickened. Because after 3 years of being invisible in this building, after 3 years of careful silence and downcast eyes, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. When someone like Vanessa Sterling suddenly remembers your name, it's never, ever a good sign. Anna's day began the same way it had for the past 3 years, before sunrise, in silence, alone. She arrived at the Sterling Tower at 5:30 in the morning, when the city was still dark and the streets mostly empty. The service entrance was around back, past the loading dock where delivery trucks would arrive later, past the dumpsters that she'd have to check before the executive staff arrived at 8. She swiped her worn ID card, heard the familiar beep, and stepped into the fluorescent-lit corridor that led to the basement. The executive floors wouldn't wake up for another 2.5 hours. That's when Anna did her best work, when no one was there to see her, when she could move through those beautiful spaces like a ghost, making everything perfect before the people who mattered arrived to enjoy it. She changed into her uniform in the small staff locker room. The pale blue fabric had been washed so many times it had faded to almost gray. The name tag pinned to her chest read, Anna W. Just the initial. She'd stopped wearing her full name 2 years ago. It seemed safer that way. Simpler. By 6 o'clock, she was on the 42nd floor, pushing her cart past walls of windows that overlooked the sleeping city. The marble beneath her feet gleamed like glass. Italian Carrara marble, she'd overheard once, shipped from quarries in Tuscany and installed at a cost of $3,000 per square foot. It cost more per square foot than most people paid for their homes. Her hands, calloused and dry despite the lotion she applied every night, guided the dust mop in smooth, careful strokes. The crystal chandelier in the main conference room caught the first light of dawn, scattering rainbows across the ceiling. Anna paused for just a moment to look at it. 3 years, and it still took her breath away. She'd cleaned every crystal pendant on that chandelier by hand, one by one, standing on a ladder for hours until her shoulders ached. No one had noticed. No one had thanked her. But when the sun hit it just right, like now, she allowed herself a small moment of pride. She moved through the executive suite with practiced efficiency. Empty the trash bins. Wipe down the mahogany desks. Water the orchids that cost more than her weekly groceries. Vacuum the Persian rugs. Polish the brass fixtures. Make everything look untouched, pristine, as if wealthy people simply existed in spaces that cleaned themselves. At 7:45, the first executives began to arrive. Anna had learned to make herself smaller when they appeared. She kept her eyes down, her movements quiet, her presence as unobtrusive as possible. A young lawyer in a suit that probably cost $3,000 walked past her, talking loudly on his phone about a deal he'd closed. He didn't say good morning. He didn't acknowledge her at all. Just stepped around her cart and kept walking, his voice echoing down the hallway. An older executive, a woman with silver hair and perfect posture, came out of her office carrying an empty coffee cup. She set it on the edge of Anna's cart without looking at her. "Could you take care of that?" she said. Not a question. Not a thank you. Just an assumption that Anna existed to take care of things. "Of course," Anna said quietly. The woman was already walking away, her attention on her phone, before Anna had finished speaking. By 8:30, the executive floor was fully alive. Phones ringing. Heels clicking. Voices discussing mergers and acquisitions and stock prices and vacation homes in the Hamptons. Anna moved between them like water, invisible and necessary, and completely ignored. She was wiping down the mirrors in the women's executive restroom when she heard them come in. 3 women, their voices bright with gossip and expensive perfume. Anna recognized them immediately. Friends of Vanessa Sterling. The kind of women who treated the world like their personal stage. They stood at the marble sinks, reapplying lipstick, checking their reflections. Anna was in the corner, cloth in hand, waiting for them to leave so she could finish her work. They talked as if she wasn't there. "Did you see what Vanessa is planning for the wedding?" one of them said, her voice dripping with excitement. "She's sparing absolutely no expense. The Grand Magnolia Estate. Richard's spending $500,000 on one day. Can you imagine? Richard Sterling would give her anything," another replied. "The man is worth $3 billion and completely wrapped around her finger." "Well, she deserves it," the third said. "She's stunning. And she's so generous. Did you know she's inviting some of the staff? Even the cleaning people." They laughed. Soft, knowing laughter. Anna's hand tightened on her cleaning cloth. She kept her eyes down, kept breathing slowly. "That's Vanessa," one of them said. "Always thinking of everyone. Even the help." They left in a cloud of perfume and clicking heels, never once glancing in Anna's direction. Anna stood alone in the restroom, staring at her reflection in the mirror she'd just polished. Her face looked tired, worn. Her uniform hung loose on a frame that had gotten thinner over the years. But her eyes still held something these women couldn't see. Something she'd buried deep but hadn't lost completely. "When people don't notice you," she thought, "you hear everything. And I've heard enough to know exactly who these people are." She finished the restroom and moved back into the hallway, pushing her cart toward the central lobby. That's when she saw the muddy footprints. Fresh tracks across the marble floor she'd cleaned at 6 this morning. Designer shoe prints, deliberate and careless, cutting right through the center of the space. And standing at the elevator, examining her nails with studied disinterest, was Vanessa Sterling. She was breathtaking, Anna had to admit. 28 years old, model tall, with honey blonde hair that fell in perfect waves and a dress that probably cost more than Anna's car. She radiated the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, never being denied anything, never having to think about consequences. Vanessa glanced at the muddy tracks she'd left, then at Anna, and smiled. Not with warmth. With something else. Something that made Anna's stomach tighten. "Oh," Vanessa said, her voice honey-sweet and sharp as glass. "Did I make a mess?" "I'm so sorry, Anna. I know you just cleaned this floor." She didn't sound sorry at all. Anna met her eyes for just a second, long enough to see the calculation there, the cold amusement, then looked down. "It's no trouble, Mrs. Sterling. I'll take care of it." "I'm sure you will," Vanessa said. "You're very good at taking care of things, aren't you?" The elevator doors opened. Vanessa stepped inside, still smiling that smile. Anna watched the doors close. Then she walked to her cart, pulled out the mop, and began cleaning the muddy tracks. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. But inside, something had shifted. A small, quiet rage that she'd kept buried for 3 years was beginning to stir. She was finishing the floor when she heard the clicking of heels again. Multiple pairs. Coming closer. Anna looked up. Vanessa was walking toward her, surrounded by her circle of friends, all of them dressed like they were headed to a photo shoot. And in Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand was something that made Anna's heart skip. A cream-colored envelope. Elegant. Expensive. With Anna's full name written across the front in gold calligraphy. Vanessa's smile widened as she got closer. That smile. The one that meant trouble. And Anna realized, with a sinking certainty that settled in her bones like ice. Today was not going to be like the others. Vanessa stopped 3 feet away from Anna, close enough that the expensive floral notes of her perfume filled the air between them. Her friends arranged themselves behind her like a carefully staged photograph. 3 women in designer clothes, their faces painted with that particular expression wealthy people wore when they were about to be entertained by something they considered beneath them. Anna's grip tightened on her mop handle. Every instinct she'd developed over 3 years of survival told her to be careful. To be very, very careful. "Anna," Vanessa said, her voice carrying across the lobby with theatrical warmth. "I'm so glad I caught you. I have something special for you." She held up the cream-colored envelope like a prize, turning it slightly so the gold lettering caught the light from the chandelier above. Anna could see her own name written in elegant calligraphy across the front. Not Anna W. Her full name. Anna Williams. Someone had gone to the trouble of finding out her full name. "I wanted to give this to you personally," Vanessa continued, taking a small step closer. "Not everyone gets invited to a wedding like mine, you know. Richard's sparing no expense. It's going to be quite the event." One of her friends, a woman with platinum blonde hair and a diamond tennis bracelet that could have paid Anna's rent for a year, pressed her lips together, clearly fighting back a smile. Another one, brunette with sharp cheekbones, looked down at her phone, but Anna could see her shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. Anna straightened slowly. She released the mop handle and wiped her hands on her uniform, aware of how rough they must look, how out of place she must seem standing here in her faded work clothes while Vanessa sparkled like something out of a magazine. "Mrs. Sterling," Anna said quietly, "I don't think." "Please," Vanessa interrupted, extending the envelope toward her. "I insist. Richard and I wanted to include everyone who works so hard to keep this building beautiful. And you do such wonderful work, Anna. You really do." The words were kind. The tone was poison. Anna looked at the envelope, then at Vanessa's face. Those blue eyes held no warmth, no genuine kindness, just a cold, glittering amusement that made Anna's stomach turn. But what choice did she have? To refuse would be to cause a scene, to give them exactly what they wanted, a reason to call her ungrateful, difficult, inappropriate. So Anna reached out and took the envelope, her fingers careful not to touch Vanessa's perfectly manicured hand. "Thank you," she managed, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest. "You're so welcome," Vanessa said brightly. She tilted her head, her smile widening. "It's this Saturday, at the Grand Magnolia Estate. Have you heard of it? It's absolutely stunning. Very exclusive. The kind of place most people only see in magazines. Black tie, of course," the platinum blonde friend added, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Yes, black tie," Vanessa echoed, her eyes never leaving Anna's face. "I'm sure you have something suitable to wear. And if not, well," she gave a little laugh, light and musical, "wear anything you like. Just try not to come in your uniform." She paused, then added with mock concern, "Though I suppose that might be the nicest thing in your closet, isn't it?" The 3 friends erupted in laughter. Not loud, not crude, just refined, cultured laughter that somehow felt more cutting than any insult. Anna stood perfectly still, the envelope in her hands, her face burning. She could feel the weight of their stares, the way they were drinking in her discomfort like fine wine. This was a performance for them. She was the entertainment. "I hope you'll come," Vanessa said, her voice softening into something that might have sounded like sincerity to anyone who didn't know better. "It would mean so much to have you there. I've already told the photographer to capture everyone's arrivals. It'll be absolutely priceless." She turned then, her friends falling into step beside her, their heels clicking in perfect rhythm across the marble floor Anna had just cleaned. They moved toward the elevator, their voices carrying back across the lobby. "That was generous of you," one of them said. "I try to be inclusive," Vanessa replied. "Everyone deserves to feel special, don't you think? Even if they don't quite belong." More laughter as the elevator doors closed behind them. Anna stood alone in the center of the lobby, the cream envelope heavy in her hands. The gold lettering seemed to mock her. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of Vanessa Marie Chun to Richard Alexander Sterling." Her hands trembled, just slightly, but enough that the paper shook. Her face felt hot, her throat tight. Shame and anger twisted together in her chest like barbed wire, making it hard to breathe. She wanted to throw the invitation away, wanted to tear it into pieces and drop it in the trash bin on her cart and forget this had ever happened. But instead, she stood there, staring at those gold words, and something else rose up beneath the shame. Something older. Something that remembered a different version of herself. The service elevator dinged behind her, and Anna quickly slipped the envelope into her uniform pocket. She turned back to her cart, her movements automatic, her mind somewhere else entirely. 42 floors above, on the executive balcony, Vanessa stood with her friends, champagne glasses in hand, overlooking the city. The afternoon sun painted everything gold, and she looked radiant against it. Young, beautiful, untouchable. "Do you actually think she'll come?" the brunette asked, sipping her champagne. Vanessa laughed, the sound carried away on the breeze. "God, I hope so. Can you imagine? Her walking into the Grand Magnolia in whatever discount store dress she manages to pull together?" She shook her head, her smile sharp. "I can't wait to see what she wears. It'll be the entertainment of the night." "Should we take bets?" the platinum blonde wondered, leaning against the railing. "I'm genuinely dying to see this." "Whatever happens," Vanessa said, raising her glass, "it'll be perfect. Perfectly awkward. Perfectly out of place. Perfectly her. A cleaning lady at a billionaire's wedding. It's almost poetic." They clinked their glasses together, laughing into the sunlight, already moving on to other topics. The wedding cake, the honeymoon in Santorini, the guest list that read like a who's who of the city's elite. None of them gave Anna another thought. But down on the 42nd floor, in the women's restroom where no one could see her, Anna stood with her back against the locked door, the invitation clutched in both hands. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, tired eyes, worn uniform, hands that showed every hour of hard work she'd done to survive. "This isn't an invitation," she thought, her jaw tightening. "It's a spectacle, and I'm supposed to be the joke." She looked down at the elegant script, at her full name written in gold. Anna Williams. Not the abbreviated version on her name tag. Not the invisible woman people stepped around without seeing. Her full name. As if they'd gone looking for it specifically. As if they'd wanted to make sure this humiliation was personal. Anna's hand stopped shaking. Her breathing steadied. And something shifted inside her, something that had been buried for a very long time, hidden beneath years of keeping her head down and making herself small and accepting that this was all she deserved now. It wasn't rage, exactly. It was quieter than that. Deeper. It was the memory of a woman who had once walked into rooms and commanded respect. A woman whose name had meant something. A woman who had worn dignity like armor, even when the world tried to strip it away. Anna looked at her reflection one more time. Then she carefully folded the invitation, slipped it back into her pocket, and unlocked the door. She had a decision to make. And for the first time in 3 years, she wasn't sure what the right answer was. Anna's apartment building was nothing like the Sterling Tower. No marble floors. No crystal chandeliers. No doorman to greet residents with a polite smile. Just weathered brick, cracked sidewalks, and an elevator that had been broken for 3 weeks. She climbed the stairs slowly, her legs heavy with exhaustion that went deeper than the physical. First floor. Second floor. Third floor. Her hand trailed along the peeling paint of the stairwell wall, and she counted each step the way she'd learned to count breaths when anxiety threatened to overwhelm her. The hallway on the third floor smelled like someone was cooking collard greens, and she could hear a baby crying through one of the doors. Normal sounds. Familiar sounds. The sounds of people living lives that had nothing to do with champagne on balconies or $500,000 weddings. Anna unlocked her door, 2 deadbolts and a chain, habits from living alone, and stepped inside. The contrast hit her like it always did. She'd just spent 10 hours surrounded by more wealth than most people would see in a lifetime. And now here she was, standing in a studio apartment that could have fit inside Vanessa Sterling's walk-in closet. But it was hers. Clean, warm, safe. The faded floral curtains she'd bought at a thrift store filtered the late afternoon light into something soft and golden. Her second-hand furniture, a small sofa with cushions she'd recovered herself, a kitchen table with mismatched chairs, a bed with a quilt her mother had made, filled the space with quiet comfort. 3 vanilla candles sat on the windowsill, their sweet scent mixing with the smell of the morning's coffee, still sitting in the pot because she'd been too rushed to clean it before leaving for work. Anna set her purse on the table, kicked off her worn sneakers, peeled off her uniform, and left it in a heap on the bathroom floor, something she never did, but tonight she couldn't bear to look at it another second. She pulled on soft pajama pants and an old university sweatshirt, then walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Her hands were steady as she drank. Her face was calm. Everything was fine. Everything was fine. She set the glass down carefully in the sink. And then she walked to her bed, sat down on the edge of the quilt her mother had stitched by hand, and finally, let herself break. The tears came quietly at first, just a few escaping down her cheeks, hot and unexpected. But then more followed, and more, until she was crying with her whole body, her shoulders shaking, her breath coming in gasps, 3 years of held-back grief pouring out all at once. She cried about the invitation and Vanessa's cruel smile and the laughter of those women in their expensive clothes. She cried about the executive who'd set her coffee cup on Anna's card without even looking at her. She cried about 3 years of being invisible, of swallowing insults, of making herself smaller and smaller until sometimes she wondered if she'd disappear completely. But deeper than that, beneath the daily humiliations and the exhaustion and the loneliness, she cried for everything she'd lost. Her parents. God, her parents. Her father with his quiet strength and his belief that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others up with you. Her mother with her gentle wisdom and her fierce, unwavering love. Both gone within months of each other, their hearts broken by watching their daughter's life fall apart and being powerless to stop it. She cried for the foundation she'd built with her own hands, the scholarships she'd given, the young people she'd mentored, all of it destroyed by someone else's greed and her name attached to crimes she'd never committed. She cried for the woman she used to be, confident, purposeful, respected, and for the woman she'd become, someone who cleaned floors and kept her eyes down and had almost forgotten what it felt like to be seen as fully human. Anna cried until there were no more tears left, until her throat was raw and her eyes were swollen and her whole body felt wrung out and empty. Then she sat there in the silence, breathing slowly, staring at nothing. Her eyes drifted around the small room. The faded curtains that had seen better days. The furniture that didn't match but was sturdy and clean. The life she'd built from scraps and determination and the stubborn refusal to give up completely. And then her gaze landed on the photograph. It hung on the wall across from her bed, the only picture she'd kept on display when she'd lost everything else. A simple wooden frame, nothing fancy, holding a moment from another lifetime. Her mother stood in the center, wearing her Sunday dress, the navy blue one with the white collar. She wasn't looking at the camera but at something off to the side, and she was smiling, that big, beautiful smile that had always made Anna feel like everything would be okay, no matter what. Her eyes held strength and kindness in equal measure, the kind of eyes that saw through pretense and loved you anyway. Anna stood slowly and walked to the photograph. Her fingers trembled as she touched the frame. "Mama," she whispered into the quiet apartment. "What would you do?" And just like that, as clear as if her mother were standing right beside her, Anna heard her voice. Not from memory exactly, but from somewhere deeper. From the place where a mother's love lives on long after she's gone. "Anna, baby, dignity is not something people give you. It's something you carry inside, even when nobody believes in you. Especially then." Anna's hand fell away from the frame. She wrapped her arms around herself and closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words settle over her like the quilt on her bed. The invitation sat on her kitchen table, cream and gold and full of poison. The internal battle began in earnest then. If I go, Anna thought, I'll be exactly what they expect. A joke. A spectacle. Someone to laugh at. She could picture it so clearly. Walking into that enormous estate in whatever she managed to pull together, people staring, whispering, Vanessa and her friends watching with barely concealed amusement. The humiliation would be complete. Total. But if I don't go? Anna turned away from her mother's photograph and looked at herself in the small mirror that hung by the door. Tired eyes. Face puffy from crying. Hair that needed washing. The woman staring back at her looked defeated. Beaten down. Small. If I don't go, it means I agree with them. It means I believe I'm nothing. Her reflection blurred as fresh tears filled her eyes. It means I've let them win. Anna walked back to the kitchen table and picked up the invitation. Her hands were steadier now, the trembling replaced by something else. Something that felt almost like anger, but quieter. More deliberate. She read the words again. You are cordially invited. Maybe, she whispered to the empty apartment, her voice rough but growing stronger. It's time they remember who I really am. The invitation crinkled slightly in her grip. Because the truth Anna had been running from for 3 long years. She wasn't always this woman staring back from the mirror. She hadn't always been invisible. She hadn't always cleaned other people's floors and kept her head down and accepted being treated like furniture. Once, not so long ago, Anna had been someone else entirely. And maybe, just maybe, that woman wasn't as lost as she'd thought. Anna stood in the center of her small apartment, the invitation still in her hand, her heart beating faster than it should. She looked toward her closet, a narrow space with a sliding door that never quite closed all the way. Inside hung her few pieces of clothing. Work uniforms, a couple of pairs of jeans, some plain shirts, a winter coat she'd had for 10 years. Nothing remotely suitable for a black-tie wedding at the Grand Magnolia estate. But that wasn't what she was looking for. Anna crossed the room slowly, as if approaching something dangerous. She slid open the closet door and stood on her toes, reaching toward the top shelf where she kept things she never used. Her fingers found the edge of it, a small wooden box, maybe 12 inches across, dusty from years of being untouched. She pulled it down carefully, surprised by how heavy it felt. Or maybe she'd just forgotten. Maybe she'd tried to forget. Anna carried the box to her bed and set it down on the quilt. Her hands hovered over the brass latch for a long moment. Her breathing had gone shallow. Her pulse thrummed in her ears. She hadn't opened this box in 3 years. Not since the day she'd moved into this apartment with nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken spirit. She'd put this box on the top shelf and promised herself she'd never look inside again. Looking back only made the present more painful. But now, with the cream-colored invitation beside her and her mother's words still echoing in her mind, Anna flipped open the latch. The smell hit her first. Old paper and faded perfume and the particular scent of time passing. She lifted the lid slowly, and there it was, a life she'd tried to bury. Photographs lay on top, their edges slightly yellowed. Anna picked up the first one with trembling fingers. She barely recognized herself. The woman in the photograph stood in an elegant evening gown, deep emerald green that brought out the warmth in her skin at what was clearly a formal event. Behind her, she could see the glittering lights of a ballroom, other guests in tuxedos and gowns, a banner that read, Ada Bio Foundation Annual Gala. But it was the woman herself that made Anna's breath catch. She was smiling. Not the careful, guarded expression Anna wore now, but a real smile, confident and open. Her shoulders were back. Her chin was lifted. She looked like someone who belonged exactly where she was. That was me, Anna thought, her fingers trembling against the photograph. That was really me. She set it aside and picked up another. This one showed her shaking hands with the mayor at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Another showed her surrounded by a group of young people, scholarship recipients, their faces bright with hope and gratitude, their arms around each other and around Anna, who stood in the center beaming with pride. And then the photograph that made her heart clench, her parents. All 3 of them stood together outside the community center where the foundation had been housed. Her father wore his best suit, the charcoal gray one he'd always saved for important occasions. Her mother wore her Sunday dress, and that smile Anna had just been remembering. and Anna stood between them, their arms linked, all three of them looking at the camera with such joy, such hope, such certainty that they were building something that mattered. Anna pressed the photograph to her chest and closed her eyes, letting herself remember her father's voice. Success means nothing, Anna, if you don't lift others up with you. You build your legacy not by how much you accumulate, but by how many lives you touch. And her mother in the classroom where she'd taught for 30 years, staying late to tutor students who were struggling, never accepting payment, always saying, when you have something to give, baby, you give it. That's what it means to be human. Beneath the photographs were certificates and newspaper clippings. Anna pulled out one of the certificates, its official seal still embossed in gold. Her fingers traced the words, Anna Williams Adabio, founder and director, the Adebayo Foundation for Educational Excellence. That was me, she whispered out loud this time, her voice breaking. That was real. The foundation had been beautiful. Starting with just a small office and a dream, Anna had built something that mattered. She'd provided scholarships to young people who couldn't afford college. She'd mentored them, guided them, opened doors that would have remained closed. Some had gone on to become doctors, teachers, engineers. She'd changed lives. It had been real. All of it. Until Marcus, her financial director, someone she'd trusted like family, had embezzled money for 2 years before she discovered it. By then, hundreds of thousands of dollars were gone, stolen in her name. The investigation. The accusations that she'd known about it, profited from it. The court cases she couldn't afford to fight properly. The foundation had closed its doors with families still waiting for scholarship money that was gone forever. Her father's heart attack came 3 weeks later. Her mother followed him 6 months after that, her heart simply giving up from grief. Within a year, Anna had lost everything. Her parents, her foundation, her savings, her reputation, her home, her entire identity. Anna's hands tightened on the certificate, but something had changed. The shame that had weighed her down for 3 years began to lift, just a little. The voice telling her she deserved this, that she'd failed, that she was nothing, it started to quiet. They took everything from me, she said softly, placing the certificate back in the box. My foundation, my parents, my home, my reputation. She closed the lid and placed her hand over her heart, feeling it beat strong and steady beneath her palm. But they couldn't take this. They couldn't take who I am. Anna stood from the bed, leaving the box where it was. She walked to the mirror by the door and looked at herself again. Same tired eyes, same worn face. But now, when she looked, she saw something else beneath the exhaustion. She saw her father's determination, her mother's quiet strength. The woman who had built something meaningful from nothing and had helped hundreds of people along the way. That woman was still here. Buried maybe, beaten down, but not gone. Not gone. Anna's shoulders straightened almost on their own. Her chin lifted slightly. And for the first time in 3 years, when she looked at her reflection, she didn't see someone who deserved to be invisible. She saw Anna Williams Adabio. And she realized something that made her heart beat faster. She didn't need to become someone new. She just needed to remember who she'd always been. Anna sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hands, staring at a name she hadn't dared to look at in 3 years. Janet Morrison. Her thumb hovered over the contact, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. What would she even say? How do you call someone after vanishing from their life without explanation, after ignoring their messages and letting their calls go to voicemail until they finally stopped trying? Janet had been there through everything. The investigation, the trial, the collapse of the foundation. She'd shown up at Anna's door with groceries when Anna couldn't afford to eat. She'd sat with her in the courthouse, holding her hand when the lawyers tore apart her reputation piece by piece. She'd been at both funerals, standing beside Anna when she could barely stand on her own. And then Anna had disappeared, changed her number, moved without leaving an address, cut ties with everyone who knew her before, because seeing their pity, or worse, their doubt, was more than she could bear. Janet had found her anyway, somehow, left voicemails saying she understood, that Anna could take all the time she needed, that she'd be there whenever Anna was ready. But Anna had never been ready. Until now. Her finger trembled over the screen. One tap. That's all it would take. But what if Janet didn't answer? What if she'd finally given up on Anna after 3 years of silence? What if she was angry, hurt, done with a friend who'd pushed her away when she needed her most. You don't deserve her help, a voice whispered in Anna's mind. You threw away the best friendship you ever had. But then she heard her mother's voice, stronger. Dignity is not something people give you. It's something you carry inside. Anna closed her eyes, took a breath, and pressed the call button. The phone rang once. Twice. Anna's grip tightened. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should hang up before. Hello. The voice stopped Anna's breath. Familiar and warm and shocked. Anna. A pause, disbelief thick in the single word. Oh my God. Anna, is that really you? Anna's throat closed up. She tried to speak, but nothing came out except a small, broken sound. Anna, honey, are you there? Talk to me. Please. Janet. Her voice cracked on the name. I need help. Anything. You know that. Anything. Anna looked at the wooden box still sitting on her bed, at the photographs of the woman she used to be, at the cream-colored invitation lying beside them. And I think, she said, her voice growing steadier, it's time. Time for what, honey? Anna straightened her spine, lifting her chin the way she used to when she walked into boardrooms and galas and places where her presence mattered. Time the world remembers who I am. Silence on the other end. But not the bad kind. The kind that meant Janet understood exactly what Anna was saying. I'll be there tomorrow morning, Janet said simply. Text me your address. Janet, you don't have to. Anna Williams Adabio. Janet's voice was firm, but full of love. You're my sister. Tomorrow morning. Have coffee ready. The line went dead. Anna sat holding the phone, tears streaming down her face. But this time, they weren't tears of grief. They were something else entirely. The next morning, Anna stood at her window, a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands. She'd barely slept, her mind racing between hope and terror. What was she thinking? What was she doing? This was crazy. This was... A sleek black SUV pulled up in front of her building, so out of place on this street that people stopped to stare. Anna's heart jumped into her throat. The back door opened, and a woman stepped out. Janet Morrison looked like she'd stepped off the pages of a magazine. Tailored pantsuit in charcoal gray that fit like it had been made for her, which it probably had, since Janet designed her own clothes now. Designer sunglasses. Haircut in a sharp, elegant bob. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from building a successful fashion business from the ground up and refusing to let anyone tell her she couldn't. She looked up at Anna's building, removed her sunglasses, and smiled. Anna was already moving. She flew down the 3 flights of stairs, her own carefully applied makeup and neat clothes, the best she owned, suddenly feeling inadequate. She pushed through the building's front door, and then Janet was there, and they were holding each other like soldiers reunited after a war. I didn't know who else to call, Anna whispered against Janet's shoulder. Janet pulled back and held Anna's face gently in both hands, looking at her with eyes that saw everything, the exhaustion, the weight loss, the years of pain, and loved her anyway. No, sweetheart, Janet said firmly. You didn't call for help. You called for a reminder. And I've got you. Inside Anna's small apartment, Janet didn't comment on the size, or the secondhand furniture, or the contrast to the beautiful home Anna used to have. She just set her designer bag on the table, took off her jacket, and got to work. Anna spread the photographs from the wooden box across the kitchen table. Janet picked them up one by one, studying them with the practiced eye of someone who understood presentation, image, power. This woman, Janet said, holding up the photograph of Anna at the foundation gala in the emerald gown, is still in there. You know that, right? Anna's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. Sometimes I think she died with my parents. She didn't die. She just got buried under grief and shame that was never yours to carry. Janet set down the photograph and turned to Anna, her expression serious. Tell me something. When you walk into that wedding, how do you want them to see you? Anna looked at her best friend, the woman who'd never given up on her, who'd driven hours to be here, who believed in her when Anna had stopped believing in herself. I want them to see the woman they tried to erase, Anna said, her voice steady and clear. And failed. Janet's face broke into a slow, fierce smile. She pulled out her tablet and began sketching with quick, sure strokes. Then let's show them exactly who Anna Adebayo is. For the next hour, they worked together. Janet asked questions about the wedding venue, the expected guests, the level of formality. She pulled up images on her tablet, showed Anna fabric swatches, talked about cut and color and silhouette. But more than that, she talked about presence, about confidence, about the difference between wearing a dress and owning a room. This isn't about competing with Vanessa, Janet said, her pen moving across the screen. This isn't about proving you're wealthier or more beautiful or more anything. That's her game, and it's rigged. Then what is it about? Anna asked. Janet looked up, her eyes sharp and knowing. It's about walking in there and reminding everyone, including yourself, that dignity doesn't come from what you wear or where you live or how much money you have. She reached across the table and took Anna's hand. It comes from knowing who you are when all of that is stripped away. And you, Anna Williams-Adabio, are someone who built something beautiful from nothing. Someone who helped people who couldn't help themselves. Someone who lost everything and survived anyway. Anna's throat tightened. The dress is just the wrapping paper, Janet continued. What we're really doing here is reminding you what's inside the package. She turned the tablet around to show Anna a sketch. Anna's breath caught. The dress was stunning, elegant but not ostentatious, powerful but not aggressive. Classic lines with subtle details that spoke of quality and confidence. The kind of dress that didn't scream for attention but commanded it anyway. Can we really pull this off by Saturday? Anna asked, her voice small. Janet smiled. Honey, I've dressed senators and CEOs and fashion editors on tighter deadlines than this. Trust me. She stood up, gathering her tablet and pulling out her phone to make calls. But as Anna watched her best friend work, making connections, pulling strings, moving mountains with nothing but confidence and sheer determination, she realized something. This wasn't just about a dress or makeup or showing up to a wedding. This was about reclaiming something far more powerful than any of that. It was about remembering that she mattered. If you're still watching at this point, drop a comment with, I'm still here. Let's see who's truly following this shocking story. The next 3 days passed in a blur of phone calls, fittings, and quiet moments of transformation that had nothing to do with clothes and everything to do with remembering. Janet didn't stay in a hotel. She stayed with Anna in that small apartment, sleeping on the second-hand sofa without complaint, drinking coffee from mismatched mugs, and treating Anna's modest home like it was worth every bit as much as the luxury suites she usually occupied. On Friday afternoon, Janet arrived with 2 garment bags and a determination in her eyes that Anna remembered from their college days, when Janet had decided to pursue fashion design despite everyone telling her it was too competitive, too risky, too hard. Close your eyes, Janet said, hanging the bags carefully on the closet door. Janet, trust me. Close them. Anna closed her eyes and heard the sound of a zipper, fabric rustling, Janet's quiet, satisfied hum. Okay, open. The dress took Anna's breath away. It wasn't what she'd expected. No bright colors demanding attention. No excessive sparkle or dramatic flourishes. Instead, it was black silk that seemed to absorb light and reflect it back in subtle waves, with delicate gold embroidery along the neckline and cuffs, so understated you'd have to look closely to see it. But once you did, you couldn't look away. Not loud, Janet said softly, running her hand along the fabric. Not trying too hard. Just undeniable. Anna reached out tentatively and touched the silk. It was cool and smooth beneath her fingers, the kind of fabric that spoke of quality without shouting about price. Janet, this is too much. I can't. You can. And you will. Janet unzipped the bag completely. This isn't charity, Anna. This is me investing in someone I believe in. Someone who's always been worth it, even when she couldn't see it herself. The fitting took an hour. The dress fit perfectly, elegant, sophisticated, designed for a woman who'd lived a life and earned her confidence. It honored Anna's beauty without trying to hide her age or compete with women half her years. The neckline was modest but striking. The cut emphasized her strong shoulders, the posture she'd inherited from her mother. Anna stood in front of her small mirror, but she could only see pieces of herself. Janet stepped back, studied her with a critical eye, made one small adjustment to the sleeve. Perfect, she whispered. The jewelry came next. Janet opened a velvet case and pulled out pieces Anna recognized from fashion magazines. Signature pieces from Janet's personal collection, not her commercial line. I can't wear these, Anna protested. What if something happens to them? Then something happens to them. Janet fastened a single-strand necklace around Anna's neck. One black stone, simple and powerful, resting just above her collarbone. Sometimes the quietest statement is the strongest. No earrings that dripped with diamonds. No bracelets that jangled for attention. Just that one necklace and a simple ring on her right hand. You're not trying to look rich, Janet explained. You're showing them what real elegance looks like. Saturday morning arrived with cold clarity. Janet had brought a hairstylist, a woman named Michelle who'd worked with Janet for years and asked no questions about why they were in a small apartment instead of a salon. She worked on Anna's hair for over an hour, braiding and pinning and shaping until it was styled like a crown, elegant, regal, sophisticated. Natural gray strands woven together with darker ones, creating depth and texture that honored every year Anna had lived. You're not trying to look like them, Michelle said as she secured the final pin. You're reminding them who you are. The shoes were the last piece. Classic black heels, elegant but not towering, comfortable enough to walk with confidence. Janet knelt down and helped Anna slip them on, then stood and took both of Anna's hands. Listen to me, Janet said, her voice fierce and loving. You spent years making yourself small because the world told you that's where you belong. But your mother didn't raise a small woman. Your father didn't build a legacy for a small woman. She squeezed Anna's hands tighter. And I didn't drive 5 hours to help a small woman get dressed. Anna's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back, careful of the subtle makeup Michelle had applied. Janet led her to the full-length mirror she'd brought and positioned specifically for this moment. Anna looked, and for the first time in 3 years, she recognized herself. Not the broken woman who'd lost everything. Not the invisible cleaning lady who kept her head down. But someone integrated. The woman she used to be, woven together with the strength she'd gained from surviving what should have destroyed her. The dress didn't disguise her. It enhanced her. The jewelry didn't distract. It drew the eye to her face, her bearing, the quiet power in her posture. She looked like a woman who'd built something meaningful. Who'd loved deeply and lost deeply and kept going anyway. Who'd been knocked down and had chosen, was choosing right now, to stand back up. Janet stood behind her, their eyes meeting in the reflection. When you walk into that wedding, Janet said softly, they will not see a janitor. They will not see someone to mock. They will see a queen. She placed her hands on Anna's shoulders. Because that's what you are. Anna's throat tightened. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, she just nodded, her reflection nodding back at her with eyes that held something they hadn't held in years. Hope. I'm ready, she whispered. Janet smiled and handed her a small clutch, black silk that matched the dress, just large enough for the essentials. Then let's go show them who Anna Adebayo is. Across town, in a suite at the city's most expensive hotel, Vanessa Sterling stood in front of a different mirror, surrounded by a team of stylists and makeup artists and friends offering champagne and compliments. Her wedding dress cost more than most people's cars, custom Vera Wang, covered in crystals, with a train that required 2 assistants to manage. Her hair was styled in elaborate waves. Her makeup was flawless, professional, camera-ready. She looked stunning. Everyone told her so. And she believed them because she'd never been told anything else. Do you think the cleaning lady will actually show up? One of her bridesmaids asked, sipping champagne and laughing. Vanessa checked her lipstick in the mirror. God, I hope so. Marcus set up a whole section in the back for the staff who are attending. Can you imagine? Her sitting there in whatever discount store dress she managed to find, realizing she doesn't belong. The bridesmaids erupted in laughter. You're terrible, one of them said, but she was smiling. I'm generous, Vanessa corrected, turning to examine her profile. I invited her, didn't I? Not everyone would be that kind. Besides, I told the photographer to make sure he captures her arrival. It's going to be absolutely priceless. She had no idea, none, that her cruel joke was about to become her worst nightmare. The Grand Magnolia estate sat on 20 acres of manicured perfection just outside the city, the kind of place that existed solely for people who measured their worth in zeros after the first digit. White columns rose 3 stories high, framing an entrance that looked like it belonged to a European palace. The gardens sprawled in geometric precision, rose bushes trimmed to exact heights, hedges shaped into perfect squares, fountains spouting water in choreographed arcs that caught the afternoon sunlight and turned it into rainbows. A string quartet played classical music on the terrace, their instruments worth more than most people's annual salaries. Ice sculptures of swans stood sentinel at the entrance, already beginning to weep in the warmth, puddles forming around their bases like expensive tears. Champagne towers rose 6 levels high, each glass perfectly positioned, waiting to be filled for the toast. The circular drive looked like a luxury car exhibition. A midnight blue Rolls-Royce, a cream-colored Bentley, a red Ferrari that drew admiring glances, Mercedes and BMWs that would have been impressive anywhere else, but here were merely adequate. The guests matched their vehicles. Women in designer gowns, Valentino, Dior, Chanel, their jewelry catching light with every movement. Diamonds at throats and wrists and ears. Hair styled by professionals who charged by the hour. Men in custom tuxedos, watches that cost more than modest homes, shoes that had been handcrafted in Italy. This wasn't just a wedding. It was theater, a performance of wealth and status and the particular kind of excess that came from never having been told no. And at the center of it all stood Vanessa Sterling. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece of excess. White silk covered in thousands of hand-sewn crystals that made her look like she'd been dipped in starlight. The cathedral veil stretched 15 feet behind her, requiring 2 assistants in matching dresses to manage it. A diamond tiara that had cost more than Anna's entire year's salary rested on her perfectly styled hair. She looked radiant. Everyone said so. The photographers circling her like moths around a flame said so. Her bridesmaids said so. The guests who approached to offer congratulations said so. And Vanessa glowed under the attention like a flower turning toward the sun, because this was what she'd been raised for. To be looked at, admired, envied. To be the most beautiful woman in any room she entered. Her husband-to-be, Richard Sterling, stood 30 feet away on his phone, barely glancing up as guests approached to shake his hand. He was handsome in the way wealthy men often were. Well-groomed, well-dressed, well-maintained. His $3 billion tech empire had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country, but there was something distracted about him today, something distant. He checked his watch twice in 5 minutes. The marriage, anyone paying attention could see, was more merger than romance. Her beauty and social connections. His money and status. A transaction dressed up in white silk and promises. Vanessa's inner circle gathered around her like a protective wall. 5 women in coordinated burgundy gowns, each one beautiful, each one wealthy, each one feeding off the reflected glory of being close to the bride. "This is perfect," one of them said, adjusting Vanessa's veil. "Everything is absolutely perfect." "Of course it is," Vanessa replied, admiring her reflection in one of the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I don't do anything less than perfect." Another bridesmaid leaned in, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "Do you really think she'll come?" The cleaning woman. Vanessa's smile turned sharp. "Please. That woman knows her place. She's not coming." She laughed, the sound light and cruel. "She's probably crying in her little apartment right now, looking at that invitation and realizing how pathetic she is." "Mrs. Sterling," a guest approached, champagne in hand. "I heard you invited some of the building staff. How generous of you." Vanessa's smile widened. "Well, everyone deserves to see how the other half lives, don't you think? Our cleaning woman especially. She spent so much time making our floors shine. I thought she should see what they look like during a real celebration." Laughter rippled through her circle. "That's Vanessa," one of them said. "Always thinking of everyone. Even the help." A wedding coordinator approached, clipboard in hand, everything about her suggesting military precision. "Mrs. Sterling, all the guests have arrived. We're ready to begin whenever you are." Vanessa took a deep breath, her smile widening. "Perfect. Then we can." She stopped mid-sentence. Something had changed in the atmosphere. Conversations that had been flowing easily just seconds ago were stuttering to a halt. Heads were turning, all in the same direction, toward the entrance drive. The string quartet continued playing, but people had stopped listening. "What's going on?" Vanessa asked, her perfect smile faltering slightly. One of her bridesmaids was staring toward the entrance, her mouth slightly open. "Vanessa, I think you need to see this." Vanessa turned, irritation flickering across her face. What could possibly be more important than her wedding, her moment, her? A black car was rolling slowly up the drive. It wasn't the most expensive vehicle that had arrived today. It wasn't a Rolls-Royce or a Ferrari. But there was something about it, something about the way it moved with quiet confidence, unhurried, commanding attention without demanding it, that made everyone stop and stare. The car came to a smooth stop at the entrance, right where the red carpet began. The driver, professional in a dark suit, stepped out and walked around to the passenger door. The guests closest to the entrance had gone completely silent, creating a ripple effect that spread through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. The string quartet played on, but now their music seemed to underscore the tension rather than provide background ambience. Vanessa felt her chest tighten. Who was that? Her bridesmaids didn't answer. They were all staring, along with everyone else. Richard finally looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed in curiosity. The wedding coordinator checked her clipboard, confused. This wasn't on the arrival schedule. The driver's hand rested on the door handle. He paused, as if waiting for a signal from inside the car. Then, with deliberate slowness, he opened the door. A woman's hand appeared first, elegant, poised, wearing a single ring that caught the afternoon light. Then a foot, shod in a classic black heel, touched the red carpet. And then she stepped out. Complete silence fell over the Grand Magnolia estate. The woman stood beside the car, taking a moment to smooth her black silk dress, to adjust the single strand of her necklace. She moved with the kind of grace that couldn't be bought or taught, the kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and having nothing left to prove. She was stunning. Not in the way Vanessa was stunning, with her youth and her crystals and her desperate need to be the center of attention. This was something deeper, something that came from character rather than cosmetics. The woman lifted her head, her eyes scanning the crowd with calm confidence, and several guests gasped, because some of them recognized her. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Is that?" "It can't be." "But it is." Vanessa's hands clenched into fists at her sides, crushing the delicate fabric of her gown. Her face had gone pale beneath her professionally applied makeup. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible." But it was. Anna Williams-Adabio stood at the entrance of the Grand Magnolia estate, her back straight, her chin lifted, every inch of her radiating the quiet power of a woman who'd walked through fire and emerged not burned, but refined. And everything Vanessa thought she knew was about to shatter. Time seemed to slow as the car door opened fully. First, the shoes appeared, classic black heels, elegant and strong, touching the white carpet with deliberate grace. Not tentative, not apologetic, purposeful. Then the dress emerged, black silk that caught the afternoon light and made it dance, gold embroidery along the neckline so subtle it seemed to glow from within rather than reflect from without. The fabric moved like water, like smoke, like something alive and breathing. And then Anna stood. The full effect was breathtaking. The gown fit her perfectly, honoring every curve, every line, the figure of a woman who'd lived and loved and survived. The gold detailing traced along her shoulders and down the sleeves like delicate vines. Her hair was styled high and elegant, sophisticated in a way that made every other woman there suddenly look like they'd tried too hard. The single-strand necklace with its black stone drew the eye to her face. Calm, serene, radiating something that couldn't be purchased or faked. Quiet power. The entire estate fell into stunned silence. Conversations died mid-sentence. Champagne glasses froze halfway to lips. A photographer lowered his camera, seemingly forgetting he was being paid to capture moments exactly like this one. Even the string quartet seemed to play softer, as if the music itself was holding its breath. Anna took a moment to smooth her dress, to adjust her necklace. Unhurried, unrushed, as if she had all the time in the world and knew it. Then she began to walk. Slow, steady, purposeful. Each step was deliberate, measured, confident. The white carpet beneath her feet might as well have been her personal runway. Her dress flowed behind her like something ethereal, and every eye in the venue followed her movement with the same transfixed attention people gave to solar eclipses and shooting stars. The only sound was the click of her heels against stone. Click, click, click. Each step an announcement, each movement a declaration. Then the whispers began, rippling through the crowd like wind through grass. Who is she? Is she famous? I feel like I should know her. My God, look at her presence. That dress. The way she carries herself. Richard Sterling looked up from his phone, his distracted expression shifting to something like confusion, then wonder. His eyes widened. His mouth opened slightly. He stared at Anna like a man seeing something impossible made real. Wait, He said to no one in particular. Is that the woman who cleans my office? Vanessa felt the shift in energy before she understood what was causing it. The attention that had been focused entirely on her, her gown, her veil, her moment, had suddenly, inexplicably moved somewhere else. She turned slowly, her elaborate train dragging across the stone, and looked toward the entrance. Her breath caught in her throat. No, this couldn't be. It was impossible. The cleaning woman, the janitor, the invisible nobody who pushed a cart and kept her eyes down and knew her place. But that woman walking toward her now looked nothing like a janitor. She looked like royalty. Vanessa's hand gripped her bouquet so tightly the stems began to bend, white knuckles against white roses. Her face, so carefully made up to look radiant, had gone pale beneath the foundation. No, she whispered. No, this can't be. But Anna didn't stop. She didn't look around nervously or seek approval. She didn't apologize for her presence with her body language or her expression. She walked like a woman who belonged exactly where she was, like she'd always belonged, and was simply returning to claim what was hers. When she reached the center of the courtyard, every single guest had turned to face her. Not the bride. Not the elaborate decorations. Her. Phones lifted. Cameras flashed. People leaned toward each other, whispering speculation, admiration, questions no one could answer. Who was this woman? One of the bridesmaids' champagne glasses slipped from her fingers, shattering against the stone in crystalline fragments that scattered across the white carpet. No one looked down. Every eye remained locked on Anna. Richard's phone dropped from his hand, clattering forgotten to the ground, the screen cracking against marble. An older woman in the front row pressed her hand to her chest, her mouth forming a perfect O of astonishment, her pearl necklace catching the light as her breathing quickened. Vanessa forced herself to move forward, her bridesmaids trailing uncertainly behind her. She painted on a smile, but it trembled at the edges, threatening to crack. Well, she said, her voice trying for sweet, but landing somewhere near desperate. What a surprise. I didn't think you'd actually come. Anna turned her head slowly, taking in Vanessa's elaborate gown, the crystal beading, the excessive veil, the diamond tiara. Her expression remained calm, neutral, but something flickered in her eyes. Not cruelty, just knowledge. Understanding. A small smile touched the corners of her lips. Of course I came, Anna said quietly, her voice carrying despite its softness. You invited me. Vanessa's smile tightened. She gestured toward Anna's dress with a hand that shook slightly. You really dressed up. The words were meant as an insult, a subtle reminder that Anna was playing dress up, wearing a costume, trying to be something she wasn't. But Anna's smile deepened, just slightly. Her eyes, steady and clear, met Vanessa's directly. Yes, she said. I did. She paused. Let the moment breathe. Let the silence stretch just long enough to make Vanessa shift her weight uncomfortably. Then Anna added, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow heard by everyone. And looking at you, I'd say you dressed up too. Another pause. Perfectly timed. Anna's eyes moved deliberately across Vanessa's gown. The thousands of crystals, the excessive veil, the too much of everything, and then back to her face. Shame, though. Her voice remained gentle, almost kind. All this money. The crowd leaned in. Can't buy class. A sharp collective gasp moved through the guests like wind through autumn leaves. Someone tried to hide shocked laughter behind their hand. Another person's champagne glass slipped, almost falling. Others simply stared, mouths open, processing what had just happened. Vanessa's face flushed deep red, the color creeping up from her neck and spreading across her cheeks like spilled wine on white fabric. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Her eyes darted around desperately, looking for allies, for rescue, for someone to fix this situation that was spiraling out of her control. Her bridesmaids stood frozen, unsure whether to comfort her or step back. Richard had moved closer, his phone forgotten in pieces on the ground, his attention completely captured by the unfolding scene. His expression had shifted from curiosity to something else, recognition dawning in his eyes. Wait a minute, he said, stepping forward. You're the woman who cleans my office. The executive floor. Anna turned to him, her expression composed. I was, Mr. Sterling. Richard's jaw tightened. He looked at Anna, then at his bride, then back at Anna. Do you have any idea what you've done? he said quietly to Vanessa, his voice cold enough to freeze champagne. The guests whispered louder now, pulling out their phones not just to photograph, but to text, to call, to share what they were witnessing. And then, from the crowd, an older gentleman stepped forward. He was distinguished in the way truly wealthy people sometimes were. Silver hair, expensive suit that didn't advertise itself, the quiet elegance that came from genuine substance rather than performance. He moved closer to Anna, squinting, studying her face with an expression of growing disbelief. His hand flew to his mouth. "Wait," he said, his voice shaking with shock and something else, recognition, wonder, maybe even joy. "Is that Anna?" He stepped even closer, his eyes searching her face. Anna Adebayo? The name hung in the air like smoke after fireworks. Silence fell again, heavier this time, weighted with confusion and curiosity and the electric feeling that comes when everything you thought you knew is about to shatter. Vanessa's eyes went wide. What? Several other guests stepped forward now, older ones, their faces showing the same dawning recognition. "Adebayo," someone repeated. "The Adebayo Foundation? Oh my God, it is her. I worked with her father. She gave my niece a scholarship." And suddenly, everything was about to change. Complete silence fell over the Grand Magnolia estate. The name hung in the air like a bell that had just been struck. Adebayo. Anna turned slowly toward the man who'd spoken, recognition dawning across her face. She saw him clearly now, older than she remembered, his hair completely silver where it had once been salt and pepper, but the eyes were the same. Kind. Intelligent. Genuine. "Mr. Peterson," she said softly. He stepped closer, his eyes shining with emotion that looked suspiciously like tears. "My God, it really is you. Anna Williams Adebayo." He turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying across the courtyard with the authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and galas. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice thick with feeling. "I had the great honor of working with this woman's father. I sat on the board of the Adebayo Foundation for Educational Excellence." Sharp gasps rippled through the gathering. Phones came out immediately, not for photos now, but for searching. Fingers flew across screens, typing Adebayo Foundation, scrolling through results, reading with widening eyes. Mr. Peterson continued, grasping Anna's hand with both of his. "Your father was a legend in this community. A businessman who believed success meant nothing if you didn't lift others up with you. And your mother, what a remarkable educator. But you," his voice broke slightly. "You built something beautiful. You changed hundreds of lives. Where have you been?" Anna looked at him, and for a moment her composure wavered. But only for a moment. "Life took me places I never expected, Mr. Peterson," she said quietly, with profound dignity. "But it never took who I am." The whispers intensified, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. "That's her? The Adebayo Foundation. Oh my God, I remember reading about that. They provided scholarships to hundreds of kids from underserved communities. There was some kind of scandal, wasn't there? But she was never actually charged with anything. My cousin received a scholarship from them. It paid for his entire college education. Changed his whole life. I can't believe she's been here in the city this whole time. She was working as a cleaning lady?" Vanessa's world was crumbling around her in real time. Her legs began to shake beneath the weight of her elaborate gown. Color drained from her carefully made-up face, leaving her looking pale and sick. The reality of what she'd done crashed over her like a wave. She had tried to humiliate a woman whose name carried more weight in this community than Vanessa's marriage, her dress, her entire performance ever would. Richard Sterling approached his bride slowly, his expression dark with controlled fury. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant only for those nearby, but it cut through the air like a blade through silk. "Vanessa, not a pet name, not affection, just her name, cold as winter. What exactly is this?" It was just. Vanessa couldn't form complete words. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. "A joke." Richard's eyes were ice. "You tried to publicly humiliate a woman who has done more for this city than half the people at this wedding combined." Vanessa reached for him desperately, her hand trembling. "Richard, please, I didn't know. You didn't care to know." He stepped back from her touch as if it burned him. "That's the problem. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Anna raised her hand gently, the gesture somehow commanding despite its softness. "There's no need," she said. Every eye turned to her. Every conversation stopped. Her voice was calm, authoritative, the voice of someone who had once led foundations and commanded rooms full of powerful people. That voice hadn't been lost. It had just been sleeping. "I didn't come here for revenge," Anna said, letting her gaze sweep across the gathering. "I didn't come to ruin anyone's celebration." She looked directly at Vanessa, and there was no cruelty in her eyes. Just truth. "I came to remind you, to remind everyone here, that dignity is not about money. It's not about position or titles or the size of your estate." Her voice strengthened, carrying across the courtyard, reaching every corner of the gathered crowd. Dignity is about who you are when nobody's watching. It's about how you treat people when you think it doesn't matter. It's about whether you choose kindness or cruelty when you have the power to choose. The silence was profound. Sacred, almost. "My mother taught me that." Anna's voice softened, but lost none of its power. She was a public school teacher who never made much money. But she had more grace in her worn shoes than most people have in their entire designer wardrobes. Some guests lowered their eyes, suddenly uncomfortable. Others nodded, tears forming. "You can lose everything," Anna continued, her words landing like stones in still water. "Your home, your savings, your reputation. Life can strip it all away." She paused, letting the truth of it settle. "But the one thing life cannot take is who you choose to be. That belongs to you alone." For a long moment, no one moved. No one spoke. The weight of her words hung in the air like incense. Then, from the back of the crowd, one person began clapping. Slowly, deliberately. Another joined. Then another. Within seconds, the entire courtyard erupted in applause. Not the polite golf clap of society events, but genuine, heartfelt appreciation. Some people had tears streaming down their faces. Others clapped with hands raised high, as if they were in church and had just heard a sermon that touched their souls. Mr. Peterson was the first to approach for a proper embrace. He wrapped Anna in his arms, and she let him. This connection to her father and her past, and everything she'd thought was lost forever. "Your parents would be so proud," he whispered. "So very proud." Others followed. People introducing themselves, apologizing for not recognizing her sooner, sharing stories of how the foundation had touched their families, changed their children's lives, opened doors that would have remained closed. "You mentored my daughter," one woman said, tears in her eyes. "She's a doctor now because of you." "My nephew," an older man added. "Full scholarship. First person in our family to go to college." And Vanessa stood alone. In the center of her own wedding, surrounded by 500 guests, she stood completely alone in her white dress with its thousands of crystals. The crowd had turned away from her, all of them facing Anna instead, drawn to something real in a world of performance. Richard approached Anna privately, his expression serious but respectful. "I'm deeply sorry for my wife's behavior," he said quietly, "and I'd like to talk with you about something." He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. "The Sterling Foundation could use someone with your experience and integrity," he said. "If you're interested, I'd very much like to discuss it with you. We need people who understand what it really means to help others." Anna accepted the card with a gracious nod. "I'll consider it. Thank you, Mr. Sterling." She moved toward the exit then, not rushing, not fleeing, just complete. Her purpose fulfilled. As she reached the car where Janet waited, Anna turned back one last time. She saw Vanessa standing there, alone in all that white silk and crystal, her perfect day shattered, her cruel joke turned back on her. And for just a moment, Anna didn't feel triumph. She felt something closer to pity. Then she got into the car, and the door closed with a soft, final click. As they pulled away down the long drive, Janet reached over and squeezed Anna's hand. "How do you feel?" she asked. Anna considered the question, looking out at the manicured gardens passing by the window, at the estate growing smaller in the distance. "Like myself," she said finally, a small smile touching her lips. Finally, her reflection appeared in the car window, serene, whole, complete, as the Grand Magnolia estate disappeared behind her, becoming just another mansion in a city full of them, while Anna carried something far more valuable with her into whatever came next. She carried herself, and in the end, that was the only thing that had ever really mattered. Anna didn't need their applause. She didn't need their approval. She just needed to remember what her mother always told her. Dignity isn't given. It's carried. And no one, no matter how wealthy, how powerful, how cruel, can take it from you. Only you can give it away. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories about courage, dignity, and second chances. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Anna's place? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, your value doesn't come from what you have or what you've lost. It comes from who you are. And that's something no one can ever take away. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe for more inspiring stories about courage, dignity, and second chances. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth today. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Anna's place? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Remember, your value doesn't come from what you have or what you've lost. It comes from who you are. And that's something no one can ever take away.